This is a Socialist News and Views debate.
So welcome everyone. My name is Nick. I'm the host of Socialist News and Views. Today's debate is on how we can defeat Trump and his agenda. Last month I held a debate on should working people support the Democratic Party. And that debate, in that debate I called for like a comradely and civil debate. I think we all want to build a better world for ourselves, our families, and other workers. And I vouch for everybody that's going to be on this call that that's indeed what they want to do. But the last debate ended with this discussion about not just the Democratic Party, but how can we successfully challenge Trump's agenda. And so I think we should start off from that point. We're going to have a whole new group of folks on this debate. So on Socialist News and Views, we let folks introduce themselves. Do folks want to introduce themselves? Who wants to go first of the two of you that are here right now? Stephanie, you're the next in my picture line here, so I'll go with you. How's that?
Sure. My name is Stephanie Chilinsky. I'm here in Minneapolis. My pronouns are she, her. I've been with the Socialist Party for all my adult life, so several decades now, and I'm the secretary of the local here, the Socialist Party local, and I also was the vice presidential candidate in 2024 for the Socialist Party USA.
Jessica?
Hello, my name is Jessica Garraway, she, her. I am 33 years old. I am a teacher in Minneapolis Public Schools and an active member of Minneapolis Federation of Teachers. I have been doing writing around issues of social justice, whether it be LGBT liberation, wealth disparities, police terrorism, fascism, women's liberation, and eco-justice issues for over 10 years now. A lot of my work has been focused on environmental justice and labor struggles and community self-defense in the last 10 years or so. So I was active in the fight during Standing Rock to stop the Dakota Access Pipeline. I was part of a mobile caravan of folks in Iowa with Mississippi Stand doing blockades and lockdowns to equipment and blocking important sites in order to shut down or prevent that being built, which costs Energy Transfer, the company building Dakota Access, millions of dollars, along, of course, with the resistance and Standing Rock as well, which I was also a part of for a time. And I was also, I do direct action trainings. Line 3 was a struggle I was a part of here in Minnesota as well. And then during some of the uprisings we've had here in Minneapolis around police terrorism, from Jamar Clark to George Floyd uprising, I was active in the streets. And then I was also I gave trainings around reimagining community self-defense. And then last thing I will address is my work around labor. I went out with my fellow unionists on strike. Gosh, was that 2022? I think it was 2022. I'll double check that. But I'm pretty sure it's 2022. We went out on strike, which was really significant. And down the line, we have won significant increases in pay for educators and support, education support professionals. But our fight is still continuing because of, in general, the austerity measures that are being implemented by our government statewide and locally, statewide, and nationally. And a lot of my work has been focused on bringing the labor movement and the environmental justice movement closer in alignment. So building those bridges and being involved in fights like the effort to shut down the Herc trash incinerator here in Minneapolis, and working and bringing Minneapolis Federation of Teachers along in that fight. Oh, one last thing. I am an active member of the Black Cat Anarchist Workers Collective. So we are a group of anarchist labor militants that are seeking to build real rank and file power to challenge the attacks on the working class. So we had a rally outside of Project 2025 architect or a person who contributes to that, who was shaping that, who lives in the Lake of the Isles. So we went and we protested his house. We've had a great, film showing of a Amazon uh, organizing a documentary about Amazon organizing. We filled out the theater, main theater. We had an amazing abortion underground defense fundraiser where we raised over $20,000 for people
Fantastic.
doing underground work. And then last thing, we held a great first workers assembly on what are we going to do in the age of Trump, and had about over 70 people come to that. And then our
Nice.
next action or event is our second workers assembly, which is focusing on worker resistance to deportation under Trump. So, yeah, that's me.
And I think that, yeah, and I think that's a good segue. Like I said, last month, we kind of ended on this topic of, how do we defeat Trump? And I kind of wanted to start from the point of, I think all of us, or at least the three of us here right now, and anyone else that's going to join, obviously see Trump as dangerous, as a not a good thing. But obviously, a lot of time, a symptom of a larger, you know, Trumpism and capitalism. But I just wanted to start off with what people, see as the biggest dangers from this Trump presidency, either looking at specific things that we've already seen, or, things that we see coming down the pipe. What are you seeing as the most concerning piece of this Trump ideology or of, a Trump regime? Well, kind of just go in the same order. I think maybe Stephanie, do you want to start with what you think is the most concerning piece of the current administration with Trump and maybe Musk as the co-presidents here?
Oh, that's tough to pick one thing, obviously. I mean, we have seen concerted efforts to attack basic human rights. Can you hear me all right? I might have
Yep.
to turn the fan off. I'm gonna see.
I can hear you okay.
Okay. It does get a little warm in my apartment. I don't
I think
actually have
it
control over the heat.
I
A
think
little
it
better?
I think it cuts out the fan noise. I couldn't really hear it. So
Okay, is that better? Okay, great. So it is hard to pick one thing. My cat is very interested in you, it seems. He came over here as soon as you started talking. Maybe it's the black cat thing. I don't know. It's interesting though. But he's a radical cat. So there we go. I should mention I am also a IWW member. I'm not claiming to represent them, but I have been active with them, and it's great to hear that we do have a workers' assembly going. So with Trump, I think I'm not quite old enough to have seen Reagan, but I think his playbook is very similar. With his presidency, it's almost like they're taking on the move fast and break stuff idea of the tech world. And of course, he has brought in a lot of the worst aspects of the hyper capitalist tech world. So we're seeing this dramatic. They're trying to throw everything at the wall and see what sticks, and it's just been so hard to even know what to resist. But I think that's kind of part of his strategy is to attack everything at once. But the biggest things I think are human rights and his targets that he has picked. I mean, this is how oligarchy works. They try to maintain their power by blaming the marginalized for the actions of the powerful and the natural results of capitalism. So his targets are trans people and immigrants, and I think that is where he's been doing the most damage. We're seeing very scary precedents set, and it really shouldn't matter what your politics are, because I want to repeat this. Human rights should not be a partisan issue. And in any functioning democracy, it wouldn't be. But we don't have a functioning democracy for a lot of reasons. I mean, we have two capitalist parties, and um, their primary goal is to maintain capitalism, and they will maintain capitalism at any cost. One way fascism does this is by stomping out the left. We don't have a strong left, and until we do, fascism will be a significant threat. And the Democrats have shown that they have no interest in fighting fascism. I mean, centrist capitalists, they will always side with fascists over any even vaguely left movement. And we almost see this in the Democratic Party, where there's a bit of a civil war between the even like slightly centrist left, not even left, just centrist Democrats like, the Squad and Bernie and all them, and people like Biden. And so I think the biggest threat is going to be to the most marginalized, um, because they need a target. They need someone to blame. They need a scapegoat. They're going to push it as far as they can. And make no mistake, if you're not on the chopping block now because you're straight or white, or because you are a documented citizen, it shows, even if you have a green card, we're seeing with the activist in Colombia who is facing deportation, it doesn't matter. As soon as they do what they want with, as soon as, if they were to do this, deport everybody and shove all the trans people back in the closet, next it's going to be gay marriage, and it just goes up and up and up. And that's how it works with fascism. They're going to attack the people that they think they can get away with. But even if you're not under the knife now, you will be soon. And that's why, I mean, morally, we should be fighting for trans rights and immigrant rights, because it is the moral thing to do. But the message we might want to send to those people who aren't on our side for that reason is that as a working class person, you are directly under threat to this administration. So, I mean, we're seeing it in the courts, especially. We're seeing it how he's destroying the few bastions of, I don't even want to call it democracy, but the things that workers have fought just to eke out a little bit of, freedom and like a way to actually live without being paycheck to paycheck. He has no interest in helping the working class. And it's pretty clear that the Democrats are going to throw trans people and immigrants under the bus as soon as it's politically expedient. And that's what they've decided. We saw Gavin Newsom do that by inviting Charlie Kirk on his podcast and just being the most obsequious bastard he could. It's clear that they're going to go as far right as they need to, and what we need to do is build a strong left. So that's what I see is we're going to see this, not even creeping fascism. I wish we had that. What we see now is just blatant in-your-face fascism with immigrants and trans people and women as the primary targets. And if we don't fight it here, it's just going to get worse.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I was born in the UK. I was a green card holder until I went to college. I actually got my citizenship through my mom before I went to college, because it was a lot more expensive if I was a green card holder, and I couldn't really afford to pay all that money. So, yeah, Jessica, what are you seeing as the most concerning elements of this authoritarian Trump presidency, or potential elements here?
Right. So I agree with all the points that Stephanie raised. We don't have actual disagreement on any of those points made. I would say I want to highlight really the attack on both free speech, attack on workers. Just to actually go back for a second, I actually come from a family of immigrants. My dad was a green card holder. Came here when he was 12 years old from Guyana. My family's Guyanese. And after 9/11 happened and he saw the rhetoric around, basically with the Patriot Act, which was really like, I feel like, I mean, it's depending how far do you want to go, considering when the fascist ball started rolling, and then has the US always been somewhat fascist? I kind of lean in that direction. But okay, I'll go back 20-ish years with the Patriot Act. My dad saw that, um, and he was like, "Okay, I think I need to get my citizenship now." And I remember going with him when he was 12, when I was 12 years old, while he was getting his citizenship. And since that, there's always been that awareness for me that our rights are kind of, they're not they're not fixed. We don't have fixed rights. We only have the rights that we as a working class are able to defend and stand by. And so I want to get back to the point I started this with, which is attacks on free speech, of attacks on workers, and we're seeing attacks on immigrants intersect with attacks on free speech, with the deportation of of people who are immigrants but who have legal status here, who are being vocal about Palestine and the work there, that's happening. And I mean, and so there's Muhammad Khalil, who, the Columbia student who was literally just abducted. And then from what I was reading just this morning, there's been a couple of other people who have been deported, targeted for their protest activity. I want to highlight that this is something that was ongoing under Biden as well. Attack on free speech, attack on um, people who were vocal around Palestine. Educators have been penalized for speaking about it in their classrooms. Students, activists have been penalized for being vocal in their student camp on their campuses. And even the recent attacks that has been happening under Trump with deportations to Columbia, I believe it was Columbia University, stripping the degrees of people who are active, and essentially kicking them out, others out, of the university. There was only a handful of Senate, or Democrats that signed on saying that this was egregious behavior. And pathetic Chuck Schumer spoke about this and was like, did a little bit of like, well, I don't stand by what he says and his anti-Semitism, but there's a clear process here. And I want to elevate that there are clear threats under Trump, and what makes them big threats is that we don't have a well, definitely the existing political party that is supposedly in opposition, the Democrats, have just acquiesced and rolled over, and in some ways agree with a lot of these policies attacking free speech, in action, and in their actions, in their rhetoric, and in their inaction. I also want to highlight the attack on federal workers, on public sector workers. I mean, thousands of workers have been getting notices that they're losing their jobs, or that they have to respond by this point in time to this email, or you have essentially forfeited your job. Now, granted, there was a recent ruling where a judge said that thousands of probationary federal workers had to get their jobs back. But I know we're going to get into this a little bit later, but like this I mean, that's great. There's been some resistance by the courts. There's been some significant things that the courts have been pushing back on, but then it's a question of like, under fascism, it doesn't really, laws are only, how do I put it? Laws only have power if you have force to enact those rules. If you have, frankly, the state is organized violence, or the state's organized violence, and is organized violence going to be used to uphold those laws? You've been seeing that, the with different rulings, like with Trump, like essentially when he had his court cases, they ruled like, well, they just decided to not punish him. Like they said, okay, there's all this evidence, but we're just gonna let it go. I mean, very clearly that the rich and the powerful and politicians are above the law. I'll also say that happened with Eric Adams as well, a Democrat for his corruption. They essentially said, well, the mayor of New York, right? Mayor? Okay, thank you. The mayor of New York that, well, it would cause too much upheaval politically to push this to punish you. And so it's like, fuck, right? So, yeah, the supposed mechanisms of checks and balances are not functioning. And so the stance I'm taking is that we as the working class have to have an organized form of we need to have frankly an organized way of enforcing the will of the people. We have to have an organized way of defending the little institutional freedom we have and public goods that we have, as well as building a workers movement, a working class, a people's movement, an anti-colonial movement that can reconfigure society in a way that where there isn't this huge discrepancy of power, of hierarchy, of political power to enact these wildly unpopular policies and frankly exploitation and tyranny on the people.
Yeah, I think you both kind of answered this question before, but I mean, looking at the Democratic Party, we're talking about, what role are they playing? Some have called for more aggressive resistance to Trump. I remember seeing some, federal politicians speaking at the nobody elected Elon protests at the Treasury like last month or whatever. Some have said, oh, we need to bring back the rule of law or democracy or whatever they say. But then again, you look at something like Marco Rubio, who like all 47 Democratic senators, and then even the independent senators, the caucus with the Democrats supported Rubio. So then, he was able to be confirmed as one of Donald Trump's cabinet picks. And then more recently, we saw the debate over the budget. We had this stopgap measure supposedly to fund the government and avert a government shutdown, but with lots of terrible, political pills to swallow within that. There were some Democrats saying, "Oh, we're not going to support that," because this will be on the Republicans, and we can't support these terrible things that are in the budget bill. But then, like you said, Chuck Schumer, he decided, oh, well, I'm going to support this. We got to get behind this. We don't want the government shutting down. I mean, these don't even have to be long answers necessarily, but do either of you see any, some role for the Democratic Party? I think Trump already appealed that thing you were talking about reinstating federal workers. So that's still like in the process again. Do you see a role for the Democratic Party in the legal system in this, ongoing, resistance to Trump? And if so, what role can they play? Does anybody think they can play a role? Either of you?
So are you asking what they?
I mean, do you think the Democratic Party and the legal system are going to play a role in this resistance, or do you think that it's like completely beyond? I mean, do you think Trump's going to follow any of the laws, for example? We've seen him not following some of them, but he seems like he's following some of them. So I'm kind of actually curious. How is he deciding what laws to follow? Do we think that the legal system is going to constrain him in some way? And have we seen that?
I mean, I guess in some ways, possibly. The thing is, the Democrats have made clear. I mean, that's the thing. If you have a two-party system and one side is, I mean, you have the Republicans and they obviously are itching to, I mean, we've seen what they truly want with Project 2025, and that is the new reality for the Republican Party. It is one of Christian nationalism. It was one of extreme white supremacy. and imperialism. I mean, it didn't take long for Trump to start talking about Canada and as the 51st state and Greenland, and whether I don't think this is very realistic at the moment, but it does signal his imperialist intentions. But when you have one party that is far right, and you have another party that is, they are at the end of the day capitalist, and their strategy, and they did recently have a session of how to reinvent the party with the recent loss, which is what you should do with a political party. Is when you're losing elections, you should. Sorry, my cat is interested in this discussion. You should decide, what did we do wrong? And their problem is the Democrats they're very insistent on this culture war, at least they were. And they felt that they could fight this culture war without actually delivering on, material gains for the people they claim to be fighting for. It's all about virtue signaling. They have this liberal identity politics feminism, but they completely ignore class, which these are also class issues. And I'm definitely not a class essentialist or a class reductionist. I'm an intersectional socialist feminist. And they want to appeal to this broad base of people, and they do talk about issues that are important, like trans rights and reproductive rights, but they don't actually fight for these things. They don't actually deliver on them. And meanwhile, most voters actually vote on things like the economy. And, working people aren't stupid. They see that, for all their promises, our wages just aren't going as far. And Trump, when you have neither party actually delivering on these things, Trump actually offers, I mean, a lot of people voted for him because they said he was an outsider. And the Democrats are just so stuck on this. They feel like, oh, well, he can't do that. That's illegal. Or, that's not right. Or like, that's against the rules. And it's like, why would you expect fascists to do that? So we have a two-party system. One is just fascist or wants to be fascist, and they're definitely going that totalitarian route. And the other, they're not willing to resist. They think that saying like, oh, well, he's not following the rules, they think that matters, or else they just don't care. And they're always willing to go to the right to appeal to voters. They're always trying to pick up on those voters who aren't far right enough to follow Trump. And so what we have is two parties, both are going to the right, just at different speeds. So one is like fascism today, and the other one is fascism tomorrow. And they wonder why. And that's the thing. When you look at the polling, Democrats and the left didn't show up because of things like Gaza, but they're not going to change their view on that. So the Democrats have shown not only are they not willing to change as far as the things that they need to change, but they're not willing to resist Trump. They are willing to capitulate to him, which that's what centrists always do. Just look historically, it's been the left that has resisted fascism. It's been the left that has done this and that has been able to build a broad coalition against fascism. And that's something that Trump is kind of struggling to do, because he has this kind of patchwork of different interests that are sometimes contradictory. But it's not that he's succeeded because he's got a great platform or that he even has any solutions. It's that he has no resistance, because the Democrats aren't offering things like improving the things that workers actually need. They need higher wages, they need more unions, they need not just more unions, but they need radical unions that are actually willing to fight for the things that workers need. So I mean, I'm not a legal scholar. I'm not going to claim that I understand all the ins and outs of constitutional law. But as far as will, it seems that Democrats are not going to abandon their corporate donors. And I don't see how we can form a broad and effective resistance to Trump and whoever comes after him without I just don't see how it's going to happen in the Democratic Party because they don't have the will. They're not going to go against their corporate donors, and they're not. Well, I'm sure that there's many Democrats out there that do actually believe in free speech and human rights. They don't seem to be willing to go against their corporate donors. And if you don't have those corporate donors, you can't get elected in the US. And they've also made clear, I want to speak as someone who's run campaigns, third-party campaigns, and who's now run as a candidate. They have made clear they would rather support a Republican than allow a leftist to get elected. And so you have this system where you have two parties. The Democrats are sometimes going to lose. And the Republicans are not willing to follow these rules. So as soon as the Republicans get in, they're going to be like a bull in a china shop and just trash everything. So what can the outcome be other than fascism when you don't allow the left to even have a seat at the table, and the Democrats are always moving to the right, and they're not willing to stop the Republicans in any way when they break all these rules? I mean, we need a strong, united left outside the Democratic Party. I don't believe there's any value in trying to change the Democratic Party. I mean, people have been trying to do it for generations now. It doesn't work. As long as they're a capitalist party, they cannot properly resist fascism.
Jessica, any chance of the Democrats or the legal system playing a significant role in our in this resistance to Trump?
Um, well, I think so I guess I'll start with the question of the courts. So judges have pumped brakes on a lot of policy efforts, from free spending, cutting of federal workers, his attacks on autumn of birthright citizenship, which I think we put a nail in that coffin in the 19th century. Like we were supposed to have had that figured out. Transgender women being put in men's prisons, access to federal payment systems, and dismantling of the U.S. Agency for International Development, which, okay, that's a whole other thing. But like these are the things that they have put somewhat of a halt to, and I'm not saying that's insignificant, but it's not sufficient. It's not sufficient on their own, because again, laws and the courts and these decisions, they only have power if the state is going to abide by them. If organized force, violence, what have you, is aligned with the will of the courts. And if they just say we don't give a damn, well then okay, what now? This legal fiction of, because people are really wrapped up in these legal fictions as if they're like concrete realities, not understanding that there's in the material world they have to be upheld. Now with the Democrats, I mean, I would definitely 100% agree with Stephanie that putting any faith in them to stop fascism is just, yeah, it's ridiculous. Considering, frankly, the Democrats really set the stage for what has been happening now. We can go back to Clinton and and NAFTA, and that gutted the working class and sent thousands and thousands of jobs to places where workers could be more easily exploited, right? And people for attacks on welfare, all of these things, people remember that. And I think it started, and really the Democrats being firmly aligned with neoliberalism. And people know that, people remember that. And because people have mixed political consciousness, they don't have a clear anti-capitalist analysis and historical like perspective of what's going on. Um, they are. It's easy to blame immigrants. It's easy to blame identity politics, IDI, or yeah, identity
DEI,
politics.
DEI.
DEI, thank you. DEI and blame folks of color and women and all that. It's an easy scapegoat. And it doesn't help that the Democratic Party they really they've made their position clear. As Stephanie said, their allegiance to their corporate donors amongst all else. The Democrats had a chance to beat Trump. They had a chance to beat him to really push back against this fascist movement twice with Bernie Sanders. I'm not a progressive. I'm an anarchist, a libertarian socialist, what have you. Um, and I had my critiques of Bernie Sanders from that perspective, but undeniably, he was a progressive voice and progressive populist that had mass appeal. And even now, like he's doing his town halls, people are going out to that, and his uh like after Trump's last speech, you had their Democrat response was this woman who served in the CIA and was praising, well, we need to get back to the Republican Party of Reagan. Like that is insane. Versus then Bernie Sanders gave his response, had way more people watching that. So there's a hunger for progressive politics. Um, and a slight critique of a critique of capitalism that does not go the full way of abolishing capitalism, but but the Democratic establishment squashed that hardcore. I remember when the I remember watching the caucuses, and Bernie was doing well, really, really well in a lot of places. And I saw, okay, so Klobuchar dropped out, Pete Buttigieg dropped out at this around the same time. So then the votes could coalesce around Biden. It was clearly orchestrated to make sure he didn't get elected. And again, I elevate that example not to um, propose that progressives running in the Democratic Party is our solution. I show that to show just how far the Democratic Party will go to squash not even like leftists, because I think of leftists as like a clear opposition to capitalism, not just softening the edges of it. But even definitely leftists, but even like just progressives. At their last, there was a summit that Democratic Party insiders had recently, and their conclusion to how they're going to have their big comeback was they need to become more patriotic. And then they need to silence the radical leftist voices, which again, really, they're talking about progressives, the squad, what have you. They need to silence those voices in the party. That is where their mindset is. They are clearly have allegiance to corporatism and will let this country descend into fascism before even having a candidate that will soften the edges of capitalism, that will push back on neoliberalism. Like that is their allegiance. And then we've just seen with Chuck Schumer and okay, I'll give people this. There was a lot of resistance within the Democratic Party to the recent vote for Trump's funding bill, which basically it passed and it codified the illegal and unconstitutional actions of what Dodge and Trump and Elon Musk have been doing, codified that in a way that's going to make it really hard to challenge those things. I won't get into the nitty gritty of that here, but like there was resistance to by a lot of Democrats, even Nancy Pelosi, to that. But ultimately, Chuck Schumer, who is the head of the, head of that, is that he basically said, "Oh, it'd be just so much worse to have a government shutdown," and just spreading a bunch of lies. But yeah, they rolled over. They have completely and utterly capitulated, and this is what Democrats will do. And I want to also state, oh, and then one last thing I'll say is even Gavin Newsom, who has been governor of California, who's seen as this progressive and is traditionally like a very pro-LGBT governor, who he pushed gay marriage really early on. For example, he has has capitulated to some of the right's talking points on anti-trans measures of trans women and girls in sports, right? So, again, that let's go to the right because really we've alienated people with all this diversity in identity politics stuff. And I want to also kind of add on to that real quick that um, obviously people who are Democrats at various of the local, state, and federal government, there are people who are genuine, true believers around that stuff, sure. But especially those who have a lot of power in the party, like this is so identity politics is something that has been completely captured by the corporate establishment, right? And really stripped of any radical revolutionary and class-based politics. And so that's part of what the resistance to it is coming from is because there's that complete absence of class politics. And it's really kind of trying to put people in this bind of like, oh, don't you want access to abortion and, gay marriage and all these things, which, are being abortion access was by the Supreme Court under Biden. That, we elect Democrats were elected and it fell to the wayside. It completely got repealed, what have you, overturned under a Democrat. But I digress. Like they use these things as things of like, okay, well, you it could be so much worse, right? You could have a Republican. Yes, we don't. Yes, we are. We are imperialist and we're funding genocide of Palestinian people. But hey, I'm speaking. Unless you want Trump, you need to stop interrupting me. That's what Kamala did in her one of her speaking engagements, and we see how well that did her, right? And people said, well, fuck you, we're not voting for you. I know my dad and a lot of people in my family were like, we're not voting for someone who does this, who funds genocide, like, and endorses genocide. I mean, that was just like a clear moral line for a lot of people, and I think that frankly is a good thing, that people took that line. So yeah, so really, what are we to do now? And I would say, the energy should not be put in trying to get more progressives in the Democratic Party to take over the Democratic Party. I think we need to be looking at grassroots organization and militancy. We have grassroots resistance that to Doge and Elon Musk, which has had Tesla lose 48%. 48% of their market value in a matter of months through demonstrations to sabotage of different the charging stations being burned in France. Anarchist folks were doing that. Solidarity, like the militant resistance, and just from militant resistance to just like general protest and like we're not buying your products. Like I think a mix of that is what's necessary. I think we need strong working class organizations, building up working class culture, building up the ability to withhold our labor is a big one. And you even have you have prominent labor leaders of unions who are saying we need to do general strikes. I know at the local level, union folk are talking about that as well. So there is a opportunity for mass resistance. It's happening, but on a bigger scale. And then lastly, I think what we need is not only that, but then we really need to be putting a vision of, well, what do we need, right? As an anarchist, I believe we need decentralized governance. I believe in organization. I'm not an anti-organizational anarchist, but like we need mass organization. I'm really inspired by municipalism lately, which is like so maybe that's skewing different political, lines of elections versus non-elections. But like just we should be restructuring local governance. The Rojava model is really inspiring of like
Real
mass,
democracy.
yes, real direct democracy, mass public assemblies where We are creating the policies we want and deciding how we want our society and infrastructure to be structured. We are the ones deciding that actually education should be a public good and it shouldn't be defunded. Healthcare should be a public good and it should not be contingent on your employment. Libraries should be funded. Education should be, yeah, should be readily available and free. Housing should be a public right. We shouldn't have private ownership of the means of production. Like, we shouldn't. We should be collectively, these are things should be held in common. We need to bring back the commons. And we need to really seriously deal with the legacy of not just the legacy, the reality of white supremacy and colonialism, and how frankly that has been the one of the reasons, that's the reason why we haven't had a revolution in this country. I think racism and white supremacy has been such an effective tool in dividing the working class, and people being okay with getting bought off for, you know, and the wages of whiteness are not quite what they used to be, right? People are seeing that. So yeah, that's what I think we need.
If I could just add to
Oh
that,
yeah, go ahead.
I wanna, and this is something that I've pushed a lot. Um, Trump wants to undermine faith in democracy. What we need is more democracy, but he wants to point out how all these systems are bureaucratic, and not just Trump, it's also Musk, and they've been a failure. And the solution is gutting them and getting rid of all this. And I am not I'm not a fan of the welfare state. I want to nationalize industries. I don't want the government to step in all the ways that capitalism has failed and buoy it up by subsidizing low wages. What we need is more democracy. Rather, they're pushing, yes, our democracy has failed, therefore we should just give all this power to the corporations. That's the opposite of what we need. We need actual democracy. And as well, uh, Jessica said it better than I did, but we should not cede things like um, feminism and opposition to white supremacy and all the things of intersectionality to liberals just because they've ruined it by gutting it of all class consciousness. What we need is, actual feminism and actual liberate movements for liberation that realize that class is a big part of it and that oligarchs use these divisions to maintain power. And what the Democrats are doing, this whole like pantsuit nation, basically making sure that our oppressors are um, diverse is not it. What we need is actual liberation. We need to get rid of patriarchy because it is something that is a crutch for fascism. One reason they attack trans people is because if things like if gender and sex are not the same, that really undermines like their ideology. That's why it's so threatening to them. They're based on patriarchy. They're based on very strict hierarchies, and anything that threatens that, which is things like LGBTQ liberation and feminism, and of course the left liberation from class oppression, is what they are scared of. I mean, look, they're fighting the left that doesn't even, like, we don't have a ton of power, and they're still treating us like we control the colleges and universities because that's their playbook. But we need is real democracy. We need real feminism. We need real intersectional movements, not what the Democrats are offering.
And the thing is like with Um, I would say we don't control like we don't control mass or official institutions, but I do think we have our movements have had a huge cultural impact that they are tremendously afraid of. For example, the the Black Lives Matter movement, which I've been an active part of, was like getting people to question the legitimacy of law enforcement. I mean, that is the arm of the state. That is the force that does internal policing of the working class and its internal colonies, Black communities, indigenous, brown communities, what have you. Like that without the police, they don't have the power to uphold the system of oppression and exploitation. And our movement is, as Black Lives Matter, that was a real challenge. That is a real challenge to that. I mean, I'm in schools. I'm granted Minneapolis is a pretty progressive place, but like Black Lives Matter signs in schools. This is my literal MFT button. It says
Nice.
Black Lives Matter. Like this is an MFT. We are standing by that, right? You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's just like, they're afraid of that. They're afraid of that movement. And even just the last 20 years of like being, I'm a kid of the 90s and the early 2000s, like in a place like Sioux City, Iowa, which is like, that's where I'm from. And it's a fairly conservative place. In a lot of ways, Steve King, horrible uh congressman, represented me in that area. But anyway, we had real conversations around white supremacy. I remember reading a book about Malcolm X in elementary school, reading about the 1919, the Red Summer of the lynchings that were happening, like uh doing music class and learning about music through the lens of the civil rights, like these things. Oh, learning about the Holocaust and the of in Nazi Germany, and how and the horrors of that. Like these are things that we learned, my generation especially, we learned because of the efforts of people made in the 60s and 70s with these movements. Those were the concessions they gave the movement. And granted, they were liberal. They did not challenge class society. They didn't have a deep or really a real challenge to colonialism and the right of the United States. Frankly, from an anti-colonial perspective, does the United States even have a right to exist? There's very much in this, like, we had a complicated history, but there was this sense that we are past this now. We're on this upward progress train that can't go back. And a lot of people are realizing, holy shit. I mean, that's where the big shock is, like, whoa, people are like, we thought we were not going back, and we are going back. Like, and so I will just say, like, so that movement and the Standing Rock movement, a challenge to the right of corporations to destroy the earth, and really elevating indigenous sovereignty and understandings of like, well, indigenous rights and treaty rights. All of these things have been being brought to the forefront. And I think and the lastly, militant resistance to fascists from like the alt-right and we will not replace this, remember that? And was it 2017 with, where was that?
Well, Unite the Right in Charlottesville.
Yeah, Charlottesville. Thank you. Like, and people brawling in the streets. And I would frankly say that militant resistance is a big reason why for a while, there was this downturn in the alt-right. And still, in a lot of ways, some of that base is really fractured and disorganized still, even now, even though Trump has at the federal level, national level, or the levels of institutions have a lot of power. So I just say all that to say, we as a left have a huge cultural influence that the right knows is a threat to their ability to exploit and oppress, because people have a sense of we shouldn't be doing that. Even some people on the right, I know, who are like, they outright racism, like, you can't go here because you are black or you are whatever. People are like, oh, wait, that doesn't really make sense. That's not right. But I'm against this DAI stuff or whatever. But like, I'm not, you know what I mean? So it's just like, so that, and then obviously, like, talking about LGBT rights in our schools and all that. And that's why they're attacking schools and our ability to teach these things, because it's a tremendously important how the people are brought up and educated in their ability to do what they want to do. That's why they're attacking it so viciously. So we shouldn't discount the successes we've had as a left culturally. But obviously we have, now it's clear, more work to do to defend those gains.
I think they're going to really struggle to get the most recent generation back in the closet. Honestly, that's one thing I'm proud of is young people. They are queer and proud, and more power to them.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I was, you guys have both mentioned fascism a few times, so I'm going to skip over my question about, Trump and fascism. I think, definitely there's fascist elements for sure, and outright fascism, likely it seems is definitely in the cards. Um,
Yeah.
but I just wanted to, I guess my question is, and I, a lot of times I ask questions and I kind of feel like I have my own personal answer to them, but I'm not sure I have an answer to this one. Is we're seeing more protests now, but why haven't we seen protest like the kind of protests that we saw in 2016 into 2017? Like, for example, 2017, when Trump was elected, we saw what was at that time the largest protest since the Vietnam War on a global scale. You had 200,000 people marching in Washington, D.C., you had people marching in France, all across Europe. But this time, with Trump coming in. We're seeing more of these protests. We had a really good International Women's Day event. I think that took place. There was a good number of folks there. Why has it been getting off to a slower start this time? Do people have or is it more behind the scenes this time? Am I incorrect in that? Does anybody have thoughts on why we aren't seeing the kind of huge or did people just not expect it actually us to elect him a second time, or what's the why is it taking longer to really kick off?
Um, I'm not sure. I think one issue right now is we're very fractured. There isn't as much as a unifying resistance. Um, and they've been unfortunately pretty successful at that, that the people who are protesting for trans rights aren't necessarily working as much with the people who are protesting for reproductive rights. And I think this is where the left has to step up. And I think this is why we're never going to actually build the better society that we hope for until we can unify these things. And again, this is one reason I'm an intersectional feminist, because we have to realize that these are all one issue. And that's my best guess. I'm not, I'm not an economist. I'm not a sociologist. So there are probably people with better answers than I have. But I think they've been very successful at um, fracturing the different resistance movements into their own little camps, unfortunately. But I'm open to other suggestions.
Any thoughts on that piece, Jessica?
Hmm. I guess I'm not quite sure I agree that there hasn't been,
Well,
yeah,
that's a good point too. Let's hear what your thoughts
unifying.
are.
Like, for one, maybe people, if you're saying, and perhaps I don't have the full, I haven't been following the news super diligently. If you're saying like we haven't had as big of protest as in the past, is that kind of what you're saying around? Yeah, like
Yeah,
demonstration.
I mean, yeah, I was saying like it seemed, there was like pretty like large scale demos and opposition right off the bat before. But yeah, it's possible. Is it more that, people are doing more of the real organizing right now that, is
I
not
think
as
that's
flashy and you
what it
don't
is.
see it?
I mean, I can only speak from my what I've been able to observe and caught up with and my little thing, um
Right.
my global things, my perspective. But like I think people are kind of marched out in some ways. Like there've been a lot of march. I mean there was the immigration resistant march towards that around targeting of immigrants. There was a lot of people that in different parts of the country that were active in that. I had most of my students that didn't show up for a day without an immigrant. I'm an ESL teacher, so I teach
Mm-hmm.
all students who are immigrants to the country. Most of them in two of my classes didn't show up. Like, so that, and that's, I think that's very significant. I think also some folks are just marched out, realizing like it's not enough to just go on a march. Like, I think people are seeing like the failures of those march politics, which I feel like since the 60s have actually been a little played out. Um, you have a lot of push towards labor organizing that's happening. Like people are really trying to build working class power. Um, and that's not the like sexy showy stuff until it happens. It's like, wow,
Mhm.
that's cool. But like there's that. Again, I mentioned the Black Cat Workers Collective, which is part of the Worker Solidarity Circle that put on our Abortion Underground event. I mean, raised over $20,000 for women and folks who get pregnant to be able to have access to reproductive, control of their body around having access to abortion pills in parts where it's been made illegal, right? And you're having more of those types of collectives pop up. I do see, and then I think I do want to note there's aspects, I think we're more intersectional than people than might be given credit for. Um, like I know in resistance around police terrorism in years past, like that movement was predominantly led by women and queer folks. And that was a really big part of that. And it is seen as a core part of those politics. That movement specifically is that was kind of the vibe of it. I mean it's still ongoing, but it's kind of in a what do you call it, a lull. Um, I think also people are really overwhelmed. It's just the fascists have really they just kind of went all in and did a flurry of executive orders and policy changes, and people are like kind of shell-shocked in a way and feeling paralyzed with fear and paralyzed with like what the hell are we supposed to do and what issue do I focus on. It's all being attacked all at once. And this is why I think our organizations, as our unions and our collectives, the institutions and the culture we build and the political education is so crucial because people want to do something, but they don't know, maybe they don't know quite how to plug in or what to do. They don't have the years of political organizing or theory or whatever to help ground them. And I see, at least in Minneapolis, I see a lot more of that happening. A lot of us taking that work really seriously, but we definitely need mass political education and organization, the working class on a mass scale. And I will say, there's this whole vibe around we need to just withhold our labor, general strike. There's the will to resist. It's just going to be a matter of if we are going to build the momentum and the organization necessarily to be that container for that resistance. And if we're building movements that cannot be, I think, yeah, easily co-optable. You think about the Democratic Party, but though I do feel like a lot of people are like done with the party, especially with like the Palestine stuff and with how they've completely rolled over with recently with this budget, Trump's budget and Republicans' budget. Like, I think people are hungry for something new. And these are the times where they're scary and they're horrible and they're also political
Yes.
opportunities
Yes.
to yes, to completely reconfigure the kind of society we want to live in. So we live in scary times and dangerous times, but potentially we live in transformative times as well that could be transformative in favor of the people having institutions where we actually have
Yeah.
power.
Yeah,
Which
I
I
couldn't
hope.
agree more. It is very heartening to turn on the news and see one horrible thing after another, especially when it comes to Gaza. It just breaks my heart. But what keeps me going is having comrades around me that are working on these issues. And one thing I do is we have a Left Unity study group where we've been doing it for 5 years now, and it's people from all sorts of backgrounds. I mean, we're all leftists, obviously, we're all comrades, but different groups. If you want to check it out, it's leftunitystudy.com. But we go over a book and we talk about how it relates to current events, and we do it. The important thing with any organizing is that you keep you keep at it. You know, even if you feel like you're spinning your wheels, you have to show up. Um, and you have, no matter what it is, whether it's going to a study group or going to protest or having regular meetings or just doing something like this, you have to keep at it. And I moved to Minneapolis in 2020, at the very beginning of 2020, a very interesting time. I mean, I'm from here, but I was in North Carolina for almost 10 years. And we ended up getting three people from the Socialist Party USA elected to political office here in Minneapolis. And I never would have dreamed that was possible, but we just, and I was lucky to have uh, met so many great candidates that were able to run. Um, but I mean, some of the successes we have, it always comes from persistence, and we have such opportunity right now. I mean, the failures of the Democrats are our opportunities. The left is wide open. And as far as I see it, and obviously I'm a little biased, we have solutions to these problems. What is the far right solution to climate change? Hoard as much money as you can and let the working people drown and starve? I don't know. I mean, we have solutions to things like inequality, and we have solutions. We have the solution to poverty. Their solution is don't be poor.
Right.
We have solutions to every problem we're facing right now. The left has solutions. The right solution is either to blame the powerless or to deny it, or, I don't know, to spit on your neighbor and get get yours and forget about everybody else. It's a antisocial, downright evil ideology. But we have solidarity. We have hope for the future, and that's one thing they can't offer.
Yes.
I was going to say about what Jessica was saying, the day without an immigrant. I heard some reports from the West Coast, really successful in a lot of places in California, and on the West Coast, I heard that there, like I said, that there was just nobody, nobody was there. Everybody was participating, so that was a real inspiring piece. Another thing I heard, as far as a reason why maybe there hasn't been as much protest or large scale demos this time, is like just all that oppression and repression of the Palestine solidarity movements, like kind of in the run up, before we got to that. So people were kind of on the back foot or in like a defensive posture, trying to deal with all their, a lot of students dealing with academic probation and getting their degrees taken away. I talked to one of the students in St. Louis, I believe, who was like, yeah, they had said they weren't able to graduate in their graduate program. They took it back eventually, but yeah, they were under all these different like investigations and stuff. I guess. So another question that I have is, we're talking about Trump, even now we're talking about defeating Trump and all this stuff. And so maybe I'm playing into it as well. But, since Trump is kind of a symptom, I would say, of the system that we live in, like, being allowed to continue without any consequences. Are we kind of being too narrow in our focus, and is it kind of too reactionary that a lot of these things are like directly just like responses to things that Trump's doing, instead of like a broader like systemic critique? Do either of you, do you think that we're the targeting Trump and focusing on Trump is kind of more feeding into his wanting to be the center of attention and failing to focus, like Stephanie was saying, on these solutions that we have to offer? Do you think that we as the left could be doing a better job of kind of like laying out our proposals, or do you think it's just kind of a necessary thing that we have to like kind of respond to these Trump attacks?
We have to. Oh, were you next or was I next?
I mean,
sorry.
it doesn't.
You should go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead,
You should go
Jessica.
ahead.
I mean, we gotta walk and chew gum at the same time. I mean, we're in a defensive position right now in that, we don't have a super huge and robust movement, anti-capitalist movement like existed. It's kind of sad when you think about it, but what was in place in Germany before the Nazis took power? I mean, workers' organizations and culture, and like we are not at that level of what they had back in the, the early 20th, mid to early 20th century. Like, we don't have those institutions. So we've been in the process of trying to rebuild those institutions and culture. Um, we are in an age of extreme alienation, which it's been purposely manufactured from just the way like the wage labor system works, and how we're isolated in our workplaces, we're isolated in our communities. People that live in places that, a lot of people don't actually have communities anymore. This used to be more of a thing in the 20th century. Like, people actually, the people you worked with, the people you went to church with, the people you live with, like, we don't have the same continuity of people throughout all aspects of our lives, like in past um, periods. So we have a lot of reinventing and rebuilding to do. Um, I would say, and then so there's that, then we're having to fight back on trying to maintain the shreds of power, or institutional power, whatever that the people have. We have to defend, like, for instance, they're wanting to defund education. They wanted to fund in uh, libraries and all these things. Like, those are things we need to vehemently defend. Um, but I do think we need to do that while having a vision for the world that we want, 100%, because it's uh people need that vision, and that's why I've been very inspired by uh, libertarian socialist municipalism of mass assemblies and people's assemblies. And I was active in the Occupy movement, and for all its failures or issues or whatever, I mean, that was the beginning of like a conversation around class and wealth disparities that for decades prior really didn't exist as much. People were experimenting with direct democracy, that idea of direct democracy. Smaller localities that went really well, larger ones, um, challenges because, there wasn't shared ideology or understanding of the problem. Therefore, it's really hard to think of the solutions. So I just wanted to kind of note that real quick. But I've been really inspired by that idea of like people coming together and making these decisions about how resources are used, how the communities are governing themselves. Efforts like CellDef inspire me. So organization basically where people are do at the municipalist level are crafting like charters giving the earth and the rivers and communities rights over corporations that want to plunder and pollute the communities. And I think that being coincided could be those movements working, municipalists, and those efforts could be really powerful. Um, and I think you're seeing online like this popularization of like a general strike, like people are really open to doing these militant actions. We're just lacking the organization. I think it makes sense that we focus on Trump in the sense that he is the one in power, and him and Elon Musk. I'm glad we're focusing on Elon Musk, and we're looking at the movements now like, oh, let's attack the money, like, let's talk like Tesla. Like, this is his money. Like, it's gotten, I think, in some ways smarter to do that than just a mass demonstration against, we don't like this.
Sure.
Instead of like, we don't support your company, and now you've lost just about half of your value. Like, that seems way more strategic and effective, right? Than just doing a mass march, right? But at the same time, I don't know if it's just, I see this a lot because I'm in an leftist echo chamber, which is something leftists have to be really cognizant of. But at least me and other folks are really vocal that the Democrats paved this road to hell. Um, and that a lot of the things that, I mean, the mass deportations are horrific and scary. There were huge mass deportations under Biden and fucking Obama, right? Which, who is just hailed as this this paragon of civility that people fucking love for some reason, whatever. And it's like so many attacks on our movements from Occupy, Black Lives Matter, and uh, Occupy Palestinian rights activists on college campuses and unions happened under Democratic leadership, right? And abortion, the repealing of Roe v. Wade, like under Democrats. So we have to be vocal that this is not just a Republican problem. This is not just a Trump problem. This is not something that if we just elect the right person again, we'll fix it. This is deep-seated. This is neoliberal capitalism that got us to this point of just outright naked fascism. And we really have to make the argument that this is always the logical conclusion of capitalism. Because when you have a system that depends on the exploitation of others' labor, the destruction and theft of the commons, the plunder of other countries, because capitalism does not exist without colonialism. They are like this. It depends on there being an underclass of people. Um, this when you have a system set up in that way, the chickens are gonna, I hate to say, but chickens are gonna come home to roost. The horrible things, just to quote Malcolm X, the horrific things that are starting to happen domestically with naked fascism under both Republicans and Democrats have just been the modus operandi for other countries of in the
Yep.
colonized world in the continent of Africa, in South America, Central America, the Middle East. The blood of millions of people have been spilled to uphold capitalism. It's always been fascist. It just hasn't been fascist towards certain people, or people have had the privilege to not be impacted by it. Um, and this is just, yeah. So I do maintain that George Jackson, he talks about that, like in his works, that the U.S. in the 60s, when he was incarcerated, the U.S. is a fascist state. Folks of color, colonized people here have known that for a long time, particularly colonized folks who are not of the middle class. Like it's so, yeah. We need to articulate how deep-seated this problem is and how we got here.
Stephanie, what do you think of the focus here?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that, there is, turn my fan off. I agree that there is the risk of kind of falling into the trap of, the big man history where you're focused on the one person. But I mean, ultimately it is a tendency of our culture, and it is important to look to the people doing the work who see things the way they are, and it is the people of color, the undocumented people, the LGBTQ community. They see the system for what it is. And one thing I was thinking as Jessica was speaking, so under Nazi Germany, they before they started their rise to power, most people believed that Germany, and especially Red Vienna, were on the verge of proletarian revolution. They were the far left was very, very powerful. And one thing I like to think about, at least to keep my hopes up, is that if we're in a situation where it really does seem like fascism is right around the corner. If the Nazis could take what seemed to be, inevitable leftist revolution and turn it into, the Third Reich, I don't see any reason why we couldn't have a backlash to, and I'm not talking about building a reactionary movement, but I don't see why um, we can't turn people against all the human rights violations and attacks on free speech that we're seeing under Trump and turn that into a real workers' revolution that liberates all people, especially the people that he's targeting most. But we can't do that if we remain divided. And what we need to build is a workers' movement that includes all people, but is led by those who are most marginalized. Because I think just as a result of their marginalization, they're able to see through all the glitz and glamour of, I mean, one way fascists actually maintain power is it isn't all oppression. They actually tend to empower the upper middle class. I mean, they had a program under Nazi Germany called Strength Through Joy. They have to build some mass support in order to maintain power. And we're seeing that especially under Trump with white men, white working class men, where he's leaning on things like their insecurities as far as masculinity and dating and women and the low wage work that so many of us are forced into, and how that's tied deeply to men's feelings of security and value. And he's leaning on that. And unfortunately, he's finding many men are susceptible to that. And that's one thing I've been trying to focus on, is countering this anti-feminist narrative with the idea that, hey, men's value shouldn't be based on things like their wages. And this cage of masculinity that fascism puts men in is something men should be fighting against, because it is not beneficial to them, even if they tend to benefit from patriarchy in ways other people don't. That doesn't mean that they're liberated. We are all in the same fight, especially as workers. So I mean, it is a problem to focus on just on Trump, especially since he isn't going to be he isn't going to be the figurehead forever. But it is a shorthand that I understand why people use it. But ultimately, we need to build a broad-based movement that unites everybody, again, all working people at least, against what he stands for.
Yeah, I wanted to go off what Jessica had mentioned before a little bit, and I think this will be my last question, and then I'll kind of let you guys do some kind of like final thoughts. You were talking about echo chambers. I had a question down that I'd already put down about, are there some of these Trump voters that are already kind of regretting, getting pretty concerned about things that Trump's doing? I think there are. I'll just say that, but yeah, how do we reach those people? That's the question. How are there these people, even that voted for Trump, that are getting pretty concerned with what's going on? And then how can we get out of our echo chambers in general? And then how can we reach, some of these people that we might be, that might be coming out now? I think I saw there was like a veterans march or something the other day, and it looked like, from looking at the signs and stuff like that, I don't think all those people were like lefties or anything. I think there was a lot of people that have maybe even been like somewhat not that political before. But do either of you have thoughts on getting outside of our echo chambers, or how we can reach out to disaffected Trump voters?
Yeah, there are definitely regret, people who regret voting for Trump, who are being impacted by his policies, whether it be maybe there's conservative farmers impacted by some of these policies that are making it harder for them and costing them money to the maybe veterans who some of the veterans who might be more conservative, to government workers who are Republican, to educators in parts of the South that voted for Trump and are noticing these attacks on public education and funding, um, and people who voted for Trump who are seeing that benefits that they should have rights to, from Medicaid to Social Security, are on the chopping block. So there's a lot of probably that regret. There's a lot of people rethinking some of their politics. And I think the way we reach those people is not by coddling, but by like the people who have the regret and who are not, who are starting to loosen entrenched opinions around this stuff is not just having some important conversations, but the institutions that we build from labor, building rank and file power within existing labor unions to building labor unions where there's not labor unions to building uh working class leftist institutions that people can plug into to building and culture. Um, and again, I'm really focused on like this mass assembly kind of politics and the potential there to transform governance that is directly democratic. I think and let's say, let's take the labor lens, like people could be active in their rank and file union and be like, we can unite around the boss here. We can unite around a common threat. And when you're in struggle with people, you build affinity, you build camaraderie, you build bridges that may not have been there that wouldn't have been there before. People are more receptive to new perspective. They're more receptive to changing, to left politics. Ultimately, people, I saw this years ago. People, it was talking about the growth of, this was years ago, the growth of the right in Greece, because they had their collapse, their depression, and the rise of the Golden Dawn, which is the fascist party. And in this video, I saw this woman who was she was a shopkeeper who had not necessarily been a right-leaning person at all. She might have been a little, I don't know, liberal equivalent to what they have for liberalism there. Um, and she was a shopkeeper, and she noticed that immigrants who are undocumented, or folks who are immigrants that didn't have the material needs to survive in the society were stealing from her shop, from her, they were taking from my shop. And then, but then she saw the Golden Dawn out there, and they were preventing people from stealing from her shop. They were providing food to people, like, and this is the opposite of, we don't want the right doing those things, right? But it made her receptive and open to their politics, and they gained that supporter. Um, we have to do the same thing on the left, because a lot of people, they're gonna trust the people that deliver. They're gonna trust the people that deliver on defending them and getting them the things they need. People are gonna respect those who show that they can have power, or they have the potential to have power, or whatever. And obviously we need people to come together to build that power, but we need enough of us to do that in a way where, whether it's like, we're not actually asking outright fascists, can you pretty please not be fascist and hold a sign? We're going to militantly stop you from doing what you're doing, from saying whatever it is, right? And people is like, oh shit, okay, they have power. Oh, these are the people who are providing the mutual aid that we need in these hard times. Okay, I'm gonna listen to what these people have to say, right? So we have to build the institutions that allow people to act with power, and can also be demonstrations of the left's power.
Stephanie, how do we what are your thoughts on how we I think you're still muted. I think you're still muted. How do we reach these people? And how do we build what we need to build?
So the inevitable conclusion of the xenophobic mindset is that they are very hierarchical, and they always seek to destroy any dissenting voices and anyone who looks, thinks, or is different from this arbitrary ideal human that they have, which at the moment is the white, straight, cishet, male, Christian, conservative. And well, that's a very small minority of Americans. And that's the thing. I mean, queer people are always going to exist. People of color hopefully will always exist. Um, they can't win. Humanity's very nature refuses to conform to their hatred. Their viewpoint is at odds with science and easily demonstrable facts and just reality itself. You can't follow their ideology without rejecting your neighbors, your peers, your colleagues, your comrades, and your friends and your family. You have to reject so much to actually follow the fascists. And even if they have their way and they finally force everyone to conform to their stupid gender stereotypes and make America white and straight and boring for the first time ever by shoving everybody else back into the closet or over the border or into a prison or into a camp or into a grave, it never ends. No matter who you are, no matter how much you've killed the fire of uniqueness in you, there is some part of all of us, though, that will have to ignore, deny, and extinguish to fit into the small-minded world of the fascists. It was never about them. It is always about us. There's always something about each and every one of us that doesn't fit into the world of the fascists, no matter how much we try to deny that. And that's what I want to get across, that even if you're not the one that's being marginalized, you will be. So I want people to think very carefully about how they treat protesters and treat queer people and treat trans people, because one day that's going to be them. And especially on the left, I just hope that we can provide an alternative to this hopelessness and hatred that they offer, that we can be kind, that we can take care of each other, and really that we can love ourselves, which I know it sounds cheesy, but with all the hatred out there, it is important, especially for trans people. I mean, just the level of hate is just heartbreaking. And I really hope that we could come together and support all the people that the fascists are attacking. And I know it seems overwhelming, but we do have a tool to overcome all of this, and that tool is solidarity. And that's the only way we're going to do it. It's worked in the past and it will work in the future. And I mean, that's why we have this on the banner, Workers of the World Unite. And I think people of all political stripes on the left can agree to that we have to do this together. And if if we don't give up, if we do support each other, we will win, because they don't have any answers. It's more about how much damage they do in the meantime.
Yeah, I mean, look at just like Trump for a specific example. I mean, look at all the terrible people he surrounds himself with. And if you remember the first administration, he'd be cutting them loose like every other day. And these are terrible
Yeah.
people that have already worked hard to bend over backwards to fit into his little box of narrow-minded, capital accumulation and hatred of any difference or whatever. I think, yeah, it is. It's disgusting, and and I think. Yeah, loving yourself, that's always a good starting point. It helps you go out and do the work if you think you're a worthwhile person, and that's the other thing. Yeah, that's what I was saying in one of my things. We all have identities, right? So like this idea like, oh, identity politics, and there's an identity and it's over here and that's this person. No, we all have these identities that that are part of ourselves, and that we need to nourish and acknowledge and hopefully enjoy and love and all these other things that we want to do. Well, I really appreciate you both speaking with me. I did get apologies from one person that was supposed to be on here. They said they were sick. There is one person that's still AWOL. But I appreciate you both speaking with me. Do you guys have either of you have, or both of you have final thoughts on this idea of, beating Trump and building a better world?
Yeah, I would say, if you're struggling to know what to do, start small. Go to Go to a picket line, go to an event, go check out some of these, left organizations that exist and see who you can build community with, see who you can meet, um, build real community with, try to do that with your coworkers, with where you live, you know. I think we saw during the uprising here in Minneapolis, a lot of people in crisis kind of naturally come together. And during crisis and during struggle, I've seen this in multiple movements, obviously Occupy, Standing Rock, different other pipeline fights I've been a part of too, George Floyd uprising. People come together and create these democratic structures of decision making and governance. And they want us to feel isolated and alone. That's why they've created this world. They've structured things the way that they're structured because it keeps us from the fact that we actually are all interconnected. I don't know who made my food. I don't know who, the people who made the couch I'm sitting on, to the like everything. No one exists in a vacuum, and the myth of the rugged individual is just that, it's a myth. Um, I would say they want to they want to break our spirits. Our spirits are the love that we have for each other, the love we have for life, and that unique spark that we have. And we can't give them that. They don't own that. They can't control that. We don't give them that. Um, we as humanity have faced tyranny in various forms or another at different times during history. And we keep coming back and we keep fighting and we keep dreaming. And so I'd say have faith in that. I'd say have faith in yourself to take those little steps towards connecting with your fellow person. I'll do a shameless plug of,
Please
I'm
do.
Black Cat Workers Collective. For those who are based in Minneapolis, we are part of Worker Solidarity Circle, and we've been putting on events, fundraisers to really defend support our frontline fighters against these fascist politics, trying to create different structures of how we come to decisions, or how we figure out these problems together, because we have to do it together, to political education. And we're just starting. We're gonna keep going. Check out Black Cat Workers Collective socials. We're on pretty much all the socials except for TikTok. I'm a millennial, so I'm like, oh, it's TikTok. I guess we had Vine, so but whatever. I guess we gotta get a TikTok. But yeah, we're on all the socials, so you can check out our events. Uh, Minneapolis is a union town, and there's union activity and organizing happening. Just go to a picket line, bring some cookies, and connect and talk to people. There's things happening around you may not be aware of. And there's and if let's say if you don't live in Minneapolis, you live in a smaller area, you could start small. Like Stephanie talks about having a book club. Do a book club to gain political education, to build consciousness and awareness around the problems we're in. I mean, a lot of really important political projects have started with people who do political study together, that then from that study have an analysis and an understanding of a path forward, and then they start and do things. Um, they want us to feel powerless. We're not powerless. That's the lie. We are not powerless. And we should not be looking towards the Democrats or like people in power to save us. We have to save ourselves, and we can save ourselves.
That's great. Before I go to Stephanie, I'll just give a quick plug, which is you mentioned people coming together in like terrible situations. Rebecca Solnit's book, Paradise Built in Hell from 2009, I think is a really good example of how that can work. She looks at different examples going back to like all the way back to the like 1906 San Francisco earthquake, to see how these disaster situations or shock situations can kind of can essentially completely upend all the previous narratives about how things are supposed to go, how society is supposed to work. So I would definitely recommend checking out that book because it shows that, in these scenarios, like Stephanie was saying, in these situations we find ourselves in, we have this terrible thing, but we also have this opportunity. Stephanie.
Yeah, definitely. I really do believe that this is a time of great opportunity for the left, even with everything we're facing. And if you don't believe me, I want to outline. So in 1903, these were the planks of the Socialist Party of America. 1, women's suffrage. 2, barring children under 16 years of age from working. 3, unemployment benefits. 4, social security benefits. 5, the creation of a public health department. 6, the creation of a labor department. 7, the establishment of a department for occupational health and safety. 8, the establishment of an environmental protection agency. Obviously, they didn't call it things like the EPA and whatnot or OSHA, but these were the demands of the Socialist Party in the early 1900s. We achieved all these things, and we didn't achieve these because the Socialist Party US or the Socialist Party of America in and of itself. We achieved this through massive labor organizing, and that's the only ways these things happen. It is through mass mobilization, and we need a political party and political power outside the parties of capitalism. So if anyone ever tells you that what you're doing is pointless, that you'll never make a difference, or that you should just throw in the towel and cast your ballot for whatever slightly less evil politician is running, I want you to look them in the eye and tell them radicals write the future. The question now is which radicals are going to write the future. And I think it's going to be us because we actually have solutions and we have hope. All they have is hatred and bigotry and ignorance. And what motivates them really? If I was a Trump supporter, I would, it just seems like it would be a horrible feeling to be motivated by that much fear and hatred. But we have hope, we have compassion, and it's very important to know that you're not alone. And one way to remember that is to join an organization. I suggest obviously checking out the Socialist Party. You can check us out at socialistpartyusa.net. And also check out leftunitystudy.com. That's our group. It's for all leftists of all stripes to discuss what's going on today. And I hope if you're listening that I can work with you in the future.
Say one more thing and then I'll say goodbye to you guys. Yeah. If you're, sometimes if you're in a place that's like more removed, you're not in Minneapolis with, people that have been organizing for a long time and you feel kind of isolated. Another thing that's important to remember is it's amazing what 2 or 3 organized people, 4 people in a really like small town or whatever can achieve. Because they're the ones doing the organizing. They're the ones that a lot of people go to if they have a problem. They'll suddenly become the lightning rod for all these issues. They'll probably have more things to do than they could ever hope to do if they start getting organized. So again, I encourage everyone to either join an organization if you're somewhere where one exists, or build something of your own. Thanks so much for you two for coming and talking today. And I will put links to all these things we've discussed in the notes as well.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.